Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Huddle Up with Howard. Howard Richards is it's his thing right now. I'm Mike Claiborne, and Howard, we got a few things to cover. No Missouri football this weekend. They get a weekend off, and hopefully they'll make some adjustments with regard to the remainder of the schedule. So, what do you do in a bye week at this point? Do you make some position changes? Do you look at some other people? Do you give them time off? How's that going to work?
A little bit of both, or actually all three, if you will. The biggest thing, and if you're a team like the Missouri University of Missouri, you got to get back to basics. You've got to look at all of the things that have plagued you through the first 6 weeks of the season, and get back to the drawing board and work on those things. Drink has like what he calls a winning reel, or excuse me, a finish reel on the plays that throughout the season that, had they executed properly, would have earned them a win. So you focus on those things, and you try to you tell your players, look, if we had executed in these areas, our record would be A, B, or C. We'd be 5-1, 4-2, whatever the case may be. This is where we've got to get better. Now, I would imagine that reel is pretty big. You've got a lot of You got a lot of thirds and ones, fourths and ones. You've got special teams gaffes. We've given up a couple of punt returns, three big punt returns, one for a touchdown that has been a difference maker. All the penalties and all the interceptions. Those are areas that certainly should be on those finish reels. So you've got that to work on. You do try to give your players time off, because there are a number of guys, you're dinged up halfway through a season. Guys have to rest and heal, and sometimes just mentally, just get away from football for 2 or 3 days and just kind of recharge, refresh. Some guys get a chance to maybe travel to their homes if they're not living in within the state, and just come back with a new attitude the following week to get ready for Vanderbilt and homecoming. Still got a chance to make some noise in the season. Bowl eligibility is not out of the realm, but you got to win 4 games, and it's not going to be the easiest. Although I will say, Missouri is possibly, outside of Tennessee, Missouri has probably played the toughest part of its schedule, playing Auburn, playing Georgia, and playing Florida.
When you talk about the time down, these guys have been at it since July in some cases. Nothing official until August. Well, yeah, I guess late July. So, maybe a little break could help them, and they can learn from it for sure. But when they come back, what are you looking for? Because as you mentioned, it'll be homecoming. The expectations should be high. It's Vanderbilt. And Vanderbilt has proven to be a little bit tougher of a team than you would expect.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are you looking for?
I'm looking for leadership first and foremost. Certainly they've been playing hard on the defensive side of the ball. I'm looking for leadership on offense. Someone that's going to be either that visible, vocal leader that when you get into those tough situations, that guy or those guys will be in the huddle, talking to each other, because that's what you do on the football field. There's a cheerleader out there that says, dudes, we've got to get this. We got to give the quarterback more time. We have to do whatever we can, hold these guys out. We got to get this first down no matter what, at any cost. So that's what I'm looking for, someone to emerge as a leader on offense. And then certainly lessening those mistakes, the penalties or the things that have been killing this team. Florida, which over the last few years has been one of the most penalized teams in the SEC. You know how many penalties they had on Saturday? One. Only one penalty. So it clearly looks like Billy Napier has come in and changed the culture. And then talking to some of the personnel within the Florida athletics department before the game on Saturday, apparently it's night and day from a culture standpoint of what Napier has brought to this team. So they seem to be on a path to success, although they still, they've got areas to clean up. They've got to have better play from the quarterback position, Richardson there. So those types of things. Listen, if you can do the hard part, the culture aspect of it, everything else I think is much easier. But if you get a bad locker room, a bad culture, guys just behaving badly, it's hard to be good on Saturdays and being consistent. And it's hard to count on guys when the going gets tough. That's what Missouri, that's where they have to be better in these areas if they plan to win, 4 games. Now, we've seen a couple of years ago, Missouri was able to win out the last 6 games, after winning or going 1-5 at the beginning of the season. So it's not impossible, but it will be a tough task.
What you've been in different teams, played in different situations, penalties. Man, it's 98% mental. So
Yes.
how do you change a culture? How do you get people's attention to maybe be a little bit more committed to detail, a little bit more focused, maybe in better shape? I don't know. How do you get them to do it? And what got your attention? You play with a number of people. What got your attention with your unit to say, "Hey, look, we gotta knock this off, or we'll be running all day."
Well, so look at the nature of the penalties: illegal motion, illegal procedures, jumping off sides. That's all here. That's mental, not focusing coming out of the huddle on either you didn't get all the play, so now you're thinking at the line of scrimmage and you forget about the snap count. Certainly knowing the snap count. Now, what we used to do, because I don't think I ever had more than 1 or 2 illegal procedures in a season, let alone in 3 in a game. But it's about focus. But even if, and it happens, I mean, you forget the snap count because you're listening to the play and you think about all the adjustments that you have to make on any given situation, depending on the opponent. But I could turn either, if I'm playing guard, I can turn to my center and I could turn to my tackle and say we'd have either a hand signal or we'd have a color. There'd be some indicator like we'd say moose or something like that, and that means, hey, what's the snap count? So he would say either like pink, blue, or black. So yeah, obviously pink's 1, blue's 2, black's 3. So the defense, and you could change that indicator, either by quarter, by half, or whatever the case may be. So they would know, but you would know right away. So that rarely happened in our case. They need to develop something like that because that's all. Again, that's just lack of focus. So if you look at, as an offensive lineman, if you look at holding penalties are usually a result of bad fundamentals. 1, you get off the ball late. 2, your footwork's not very good. If you're playing left tackle, you open up too much on the outside or you get beat on the inside. Guy rips through your shoulder with a rip move. And now all of a sudden you turn, he's under here like this. All you can do is grab jersey. But it usually starts with footwork or getting off the ball late. So those types of things, the way to correct them, Mike, is you got to work on it. And you don't get a chance to work on those things during team drills. You can talk about them during, your meeting times. You got to go before practice. You've got to do it after practice. I can't stress that enough. That's how you improve, your fundamentals to the point where you're not really thinking through it. Once the ball snapped, you want to be in great position. When you strike, you want your footwork to be good. If all those things are in place, more times than not, you're going to win the battle, the one-on-one battle with the guy across from you.
See, I also think it has something to do with conditioning as well, because when you physically
get
break
tired.
down,
Yep,
you mentally start making bad decisions as well. And because I look at guys today, and granted, different era. You know how you got in shape, you ran. You were doing gases, you were doing sprints, you were doing all sorts of things before practice or after practice. And I don't know how much that exists today. Hopefully it's not on the honor system where guys are going to worry about keeping themselves in shape. But, I've always felt like you show me a tired team, I'll show you teams going to commit a lot of penalties because they're not in shape. But it's something that, you have to take a look at down the road. And as you mentioned, Missouri's got to be better at making sure that's not a commonality for them for the remainder of the season. With that said, you mentioned the tough part of the schedule is over. What changes or what improvements have you seen? Because the one thing you and I have talked about from day one, you can go out and get all the Chuckerberger All-American receivers and running backs and quarterbacks. But if you don't have a legitimate offensive line, a cohesive unit, it's going to be hard to beat people on Saturday. And I think we've seen that a few times with Missouri where there were a few breakdowns and maybe some guys were getting overwhelmed. And remember, it's the SEC where if you don't have good line play, you have no chance. But where do you see an improvement and where do you see a concern where there's certainly got to be a need for more?
I can't say that I have seen improvement. I've seen for the most part, I've seen consistently inconsistent play. Now, what's it going to take? Do you give an opportunity to some of your backups, at least at the very minimum, spot playing?
Yeah.
Where you're going to have, you're going to commit to a guy coming in and getting a couple of series during a half, to give your starters a spell, but also give that backup some experience in the event someone either is just not getting it done later on down the road, or if someone gets hurt. And that's critical for your younger players or your backups to have that real game experience. I think that's just wise to do. Then the only reason you wouldn't do that is if your offensive line is just not making mistakes. But clearly that's not the issue. You can also utilize, I'd say, quicker throws more often than not. Now, what that gets you is more short to intermediate passes. You're not going to get a lot of deep shots, if you will, with quicker throws, but you at least protect your quarterback. Now, and what that could do is that teams start to see this. You're pulling that defense, the back end up closer.
Then you go up top.
Then you go up top, right? You're utilizing more play action, but then you've got to have a solid running game. And Missouri has shown that it can run the ball, but they haven't really committed to it, to me, enough times in enough situations. And I think had they been able to do that, I think the record would probably not also be 2-4. But that's just from my perspective. I'm not coaching the team, but I do see areas where, especially in pass protection, where you've been bad, help your team out by just running the ball. If you can run it, and listen, these running backs by committee are pretty close to what Tyler Beatty did last year, even with marginal offensive line play. So if you can elevate the offensive line play in the second half, these Missouri running backs still have an opportunity to end up with a good tandem numbers-wise for the rest of the season, because they've shown that they can all make big plays. They've all broken away big runs. Cody Schrader in the Georgia game ripped off a 63-yard. That's one of the longest runs in the SEC, if not the longest run this season. So it shows you that the talent's there. Now, they did catch him, but they caught him on a 1-yard line. So I'm confident in the guys and what they can do, but they've got to have more help from the guys up front. There's too many tackles for loss. There were 13 tackles for loss in the Florida game. And that's just, you're allowing too much penetration. You got a young guy playing center in Connor Tollerson, first-year starter. He's not that big. So going forward, he's either got to find a way, you got to get him help. The guy's got to gain weight going into next season. Sometimes it's a matter of tightening your splits. When you're doing combo blocks to not allow penetration from your nose tackle or the defensive tackle, depending on the scheme and the play that you're running. So there are things that they can adjust to. But again, you got to drill these things. You got to drill them throughout the week. And you got to take a guy that's next to you, either your center or your guard, or your tackle rather, and just work on those footsteps on particular plays. Your combo block here, double team block there. And just do it so that it becomes second nature. That's the only way that you're going to get better. It's a mental mindset. Your coaches can only do so much. Individually, as a ball player, it's on you. They're going to prepare you from a game plan and fundamentals wise. The rest is on you from a conditioning standpoint, from a weight standpoint, your strength. That's you as the individual player. How much commitment do you have to playing the position at the top level, at the highest level that you can?
Let's take our first break. We'll come back. There's some SEC action we have to get to, followed by an interesting NFL schedule that comes your way after this.
St. Louis Acura has an unbeatable selection of new cars arriving daily, like the all-new 2023 Acura Integra. We also have a great selection of over 200 pre-owned and factory precision courtesy vehicles with finance rates as low as 1.9% for 36 months with approved credit. And we've added Saturday service hours to our newly renovated service facility. Don't forget, we'll buy your vehicle here at our dealership or from the convenience of your home. St. Louis Acura, better than ever for you.
There's always been a bright side to living in downstate Illinois. Ameren, Illinois is making it even brighter with a little help from the sun. Right now, we're building a next-generation solar facility to bring you cleaner energy for generations to come. It's good for the environment, your neighborhood, and everyone living in downstate Illinois. That's brighter thinking. That's energy at work. Learn how you can participate in solar programs at amerinillinois.com/renewables.
Welcome back, everybody. It's Huddle Up with Howard Richards. I'm Mike Claiborne. All right, Howard, the marquee game of the season, in my opinion, so far in the SEC, Alabama taking on Tennessee, going to Rocky Top. And that's going to be an interesting setup. They'll have 105,000 people showing up. Tennessee hadn't had a lot to root about, but Josh Heupel has gone in there. And as you said earlier, he's kind of changed the culture. He's been able to recruit extremely well. So this will be a real test for Tennessee to see how far they are, but it'll also be a good test for Alabama to prepare themselves for later in the year.
Yeah, Tennessee's offense is, man, they're so explosive and hitting on all cylinders behind the quarterback play of Hendon Hooker, who's just an outstanding, a multifaceted quarterback. He can beat you with his legs. He can beat you with his arms. He's a smart guy, very articulate, a great personality, high character guy. I think Tennessee's biggest weakness is probably its defense. But conversely, if you look at Alabama, the key is whether or not, their Heisman Trophy winner is going to be taking snaps, right? Or if it's going to be the backup quarterback. I would say if the starter is going to be there, then I'm going to give that edge to the Crimson Tide, even though they're playing at Rocky Top. If it's a backup, even though he is shown to be very capable, you have to see him in a big game like this at Tennessee. Now, I think it's probably going to be a much closer game. But this is where Tennessee has aimed to be, to be able to beat the top teams, certainly in the West, and then obviously he's got to challenge Georgia in the East. But it should be an interesting matchup, and I'll have my eyes on it.
I think that Alabama. Nick Saban's got to try and buy some time for his offense because he's got a really good defense. I mean, he's got a Heisman Trophy candidate over there. And, when you think about Anderson, but they've got some other guys who really now start to play well. And maybe, as I said, buying time to get Bryce Young healthy again, get that offense more in sync because they don't really have the difference maker yet that we've seen with Jameson Williams, Devontae Smith, people like that, Najee Harris. I mean, they always had a guy they could roll out and you say, oh, boy. But that guy hasn't emerged yet. And once he does, or once they do, Alabama's going to be a handful. And plus, they got to get this guy ready because Bryce Young will be out of there pretty soon. So they got to get somebody else ready anyway.
Those are all good points. Now, that running back that wears number 1 for Alabama, I can't remember names, but he's pretty talented and really, really, really quick. Knows how to run the football. And typically it's games like this with Alabama where your playmakers, guys that are serious ball players, are going to emerge in a game like this. So whether it's him, Will Anderson, he's going to be there at the linebacker position. He's going to be probably making plays all over the place. I really do want to know if Bryce is going to be ready. Do you risk him and play him even though he's not 100%? Or do you play the backup? And that's a tough decision for Nick to have to make. But listen, I still think if Bryce is not ready, you go with the backup because I think he has shown that he is capable, and you want to see what he's going to be able to do in these situations. Now we know Alabama has been in this place before when Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Hurts were battling it out. Jalen was a starter. He got benched for Tua, and Tua went on, was doing some great things, and then he gets hurt in the national championship game, and Jalen comes in and makes a big play, and they win it. As much as you like to have one guy in there, the fact that they have a capable backup. If I were an Alabama fan, I would not be too worried about what's coming down the pike because usually they've got someone that's ready to step up and be a playmaker. So the biggest thing is their receiving course seems to have dropped off a little bit from where they were the last 5 years or so. But listen, that just means everyone else has to step up wherever they're playing.
They're going to get a chance. There's no doubt about that. Hey, we have 6 teams in the SEC that are nationally ranked. There's a couple more that are knocking on the door. Best team you've seen in the SEC, and in your opinion, from what you've seen, is the conference up, indifferent, or maybe not as good as they've been in the past?
I'm going to say it's probably about the same. Listen, Ole Miss is one of those teams that still can be very scary. Even Mississippi State, with Mike Leach at the helm, you just never know what to expect. But that quarterback, Will Rogers, is playing pretty well. They got a guy, corner, can't think of his name, but he made some big plays in their last game. This Tennessee, we talked about them. Are they ready to take the next step? You got to go through Georgia in the East. They still rule the roost. But I think that's probably the way it's going to finish, unless Tennessee can knock off Georgia. Now, South Carolina was able to
upset.
pull off an upset over the weekend. But, is South Carolina a team that's ready to take the next step? Just don't know yet. And Missouri certainly will be going there immediately after the homecoming game against Vanderbilt. So, you got a Vanderbilt team that's on the rise, and then you got to go on the road again to a place that Missouri is. They've been able to win there, but hasn't always been the easiest. So you just don't know. You don't know what kind of South Carolina team you'll get, and you don't know what type of Missouri team you'll get. Because we've seen Missouri's been – they've got 3 straight losses, but they were right there. They were competitive in all those games. And if not for the self-destruction – we'd be talking about Missouri being right up there with a lot of those teams that had a chance here.
We're still a ways out from the bowl games, but SEC 8 teams, 9 teams will be in bowl games.
Probably so.
That's amazing.
And just look at history. Look at the history is kind of what dictates the future. And it might be a different 8 collectively.
Yeah.
But that's not out of the realm to have more than the majority of the 14 teams in the conference to be playing in postseason.
Let's switch gears to the NFL. One game I'm looking forward to seeing this weekend, Dallas and Philadelphia. And, Dallas is rushing the passer as well as I've seen them do it in a long time. Problem is they're trying to tackle Jalen Hurts, who's playing really well. And I still don't think he gets the credit for being not just a good player, but just a really incredible leader, a guy who is well respected at every level he's ever played at. And now he's taking on a Philadelphia team that stayed away from injury, and they seem like they're real. They seem like they're for real on both sides of the ball. But they'll get a good test against Dallas. We don't know who's going to quarterback for the Cowboys. I got to think it's going to be Rush again. But overall, this probably is the marquee game of the weekend. Well, then you have Kansas City and
Buffalo. Yeah, I agree. Dallas, they beat up on Jalen Hurts pretty badly last year, I think, at Philadelphia. I don't know that I don't think it's the same Philadelphia team. They had some struggles on the offensive line last season, but they seem to be back at full strength this year. So that's really going to be the key. And Phillies, they'll try to run it. Dallas has shown some susceptibility, especially in the middle, of being able to run on them. But they've been more of a bend and don't break mentality on defense. They have not given up more than 19 points to an opponent thus far this season. And that bodes well. The problem is that they haven't been able to score more than 24, 25 points. So they've got to be able to figure out a way to score. With CeeDee Lamb, even though he's the number 1 receiver, at times he seems to be
a lot of drops, man.
Yeah, a lot of lackadaisical on the field. He's got to step up his game. I was still disappointed that they let Amari Cooper go because I thought that
he was a glue guy, good route runner.
No doubt.
He was a glue guy that did a lot of the fundamental things that CeeDee Lamb is yet to grasp.
Right.
And here's the other thing I give Dallas credit. Their offensive line is starting to run block a lot better. I mean, Elliott's having some quality games. Tony Pollard's breaking off some big runs. And that's something that's being overlooked, especially with the money you spend on Ezekiel Elliott. You're still not getting the bang for your buck, but at any rate, he's better in this year than he's been in the last couple of years. And you have to respect that running game that they have and it's really kind of protecting Rush as well, where he doesn't find himself in third and long distances very much. And I think that's been a big help on why the offense has been able to generate some real punch.
Yeah, it's true. And the thing about Zeke is that he's healthy this year, whereas last year he was really banged up, and it certainly affected his ability to be effective, on a consistent basis. The one key area, Dalton Schultz got hurt again. He had a nagging knee injury at the tight end position. I don't know what his situation will be on Sunday, but he's a guy that they really need to depend on, certainly in running the football with his ability to block, but also catching, being that additional threat in the passing game. So to me, those are going to be the keys for this team offensively. I think, as you mentioned, it's probably going to be Rush. Listen, if Dak isn't 100%, I would not put him out there.
Don't play him
until he's shown the propensity to be able to come in and make plays. Now, you always have him as a backup in the event that Cooper Rush struggles against Philly, you could bring him in. But I think I'd start Rush at least another week. Hey, he's got the hot hand. They seem to be gelling and playing reasonably well on offense. But in Philly, you need to get ahead. You need to start fast up there. You can't afford to make a lot of mistakes. If you can do that against Philly, then you got a shot. But listen, it should be a close game. It should be very exciting, certainly on Sunday Night Football. I'm looking forward to it. Then the other game we talked about, the Chiefs and the Bills, sort of a rematch from the championship game last year. The fact that they're playing at Kansas City, it's the first time probably since Mahomes became the starting quarterback, that Kansas City is not favored at home. The Bills are favored by 2, but I would still favor the Chiefs in that game because they're playing at home. And listen, Travis Kelce last week was just playing.
They didn't have an answer for him.
No, not at all. I mean, they make it look so easy, but that's Kelce and Mahomes working together. Those guys work after practice. I know that because one of my Mizzou teammates, Andy Hill, is an assistant coach on that team. So he says those guys are just amazing together with what they do, and they've got this language that they speak between the two of them that no one else can comprehend, and it just works. It's almost like they can make plays at will. And that's the kind of magic that you have to have on a championship caliber team.
They can break the huddle and they see the same thing and don't even have to say anything, and
Exactly.
They know where it's supposed to go. Hey, let me ask you, when you look at these quarterbacks, have we ever had an era where we've had so many big arm quarterbacks? I mean, you got some guys now that can just flat out spin it. We talked about Mahomes and quarterback from Buffalo, Jalen Hurts can throw it. I mean, you look at up and down, all of these guys. First of all, they're bigger than anything we've ever seen a quarterback.
Yeah,
but
no doubt.
I mean, I'm impressed with the velocity and the distance they can throw football now. And you used to have a couple of guys that could do it, and everybody else was an intermediate passing guy. Maybe he could turn it loose once or twice. These guys can go as long as the field is at any time now.
You have to throw Justin Herbert into that mix too.
Yeah.
Even Derek Carr is I think, having Devontae Adams on his roster, I think it has upped his game as well. I mean, that ball late in the game the other night, I mean, it was crazy how he just dropped it in the bucket, and Adams he beats 2 guys deep at the post. Perfect throw. And it just shows you, how valuable it is to have a number one receiver, a guy that can beat virtually anyone, with his route running and also with his ability to make plays, but having a quarterback that can get it there, not just with a strong arm, but also with accuracy. And that is what we have seen across the league. The kid at Buffalo. I mean, Josh Allen is just with his size. I mean, he's like 6'7".
He's almost as big as you were as a player.
Yeah, probably bigger.
Yeah,
I don't know if anyone's weighing the quarterbacks in midseason, but he's a monster.
And think about if you're a 190-pound corner trying to tackle him, he decides to tuck it and run with it. I mean, it's a challenge for sure. Hey, listen.
Let me ask you this: do you remember a quarterback that the old Washington Redskins had out of Auburn, Jason Campbell?
Oh yeah, first round pick.
So when Missouri played Campbell, in between timeouts, I was running to the restroom, and as soon as I walk out the door, I almost run into this dude who I'm kind of looking up to. And then I take a few steps and I realize that's Jason Campbell. I thought he went about, maybe 6'4", 230. He's taller than I am. I actually had to look up to the guy. I think he's grown after he's gotten out of the league.
Well, Cam Newton was like that too.
Yes, exactly.
Cam Newton was a monster. I mean, easily a tight end in any other league era.
They grow them big at Auburn, don't they?
There ain't no doubt about it. They don't do much else, but they can do that. Speaking of which, other than bad water, the state of Mississippi's putting some pretty good football players out there. When you think about Ole Miss, Mississippi State, you can't overlook Jackson State and what Deion's doing there.
I think, it has always been a state that has been talent rich with athletes. And finally, when you've got some coaches there that are able to have some good recruiting years and then string together good teams. Listen, the coach at Ole Miss he's had his issues, but he has put together a fine team there. And I think that they have learned to play for him. He's changed the culture there. But also Mike Leach has kind of done the same thing there, after, succeeding Dan Mullen, who went to Florida from Mississippi State. They're doing something special there. And of course, you mentioned Deion. Will he be a guy that gets considered for a Power 5 job? I think really it's up to him.
Yeah.
But I don't know that he's ready to make that move, not necessarily because he couldn't do it, but I think he has a level of commitment to those young men that are going to school there. He's trying to build something special at Jackson State and really trying to highlight, what the HBCUs can do if they have the right people in place. So that remains to be seen if he makes the jump to.
Well, I hope he sticks around for a little bit, because what he's done for that conference and the players that he's developed in a short period of time is something that, it gives people a reason to say, hey, maybe there's another Deion out there. And once these other coaches start to see, hey, I'd like to go in there and build a program just to build their resume, I think it's great for the game. And I know he has some haters out there, but what I see from him every Saturday is a very well-composed team. He has fun with it. He's trying to create responsibility for these young men after their careers are over. And so more power to him. More power to you, man. We are out of time for today. Some good football, as I said to you earlier, man. Now that we're beyond week 4, this is when we really start to see what we have, and I can't wait to see the games this weekend.
Totally agree. Should be fun.
He's Howard Richards. I'm Mike Claiborne. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Huddle Up with Howard on Claves Online.